2 months had passed since the night my ex's text flashed on my screen. Can we talk? Even now, I can remember the exact vibration of my phone, the way my chest tightened, the way my fingers froze. Those 3 words looked so simple on the screen, yet they carried the weight of everything we had been through and everything I didn't want to relive. I had stared at it for a full minute, a long, stretching 60 seconds where my thumb hovered over reply, almost as though the phone itself was testing me. My heart raced, my thoughts scrambled, half of me wanting to answer, half of me screaming not to. And in the end, I did the only thing that made sense. I locked my phone. I never responded. Not that night, not the next day. Not once. The silence was my reply, and I chose to let it speak louder than anything I could have typed. Some things don't deserve explanations. Some wounds don't deserve reopening. Some people don't deserve access to the healed version of you. Since then, I had been rebuilding myself. Not for him. Not for anyone else watching. But for me. For the woman staring back at me in the mirror. For the part of me that had been buried under hurt, yet still longed for light. I started waking up without that dull ache in my chest. Slowly, my mornings began to feel less heavy, less haunted. The bed that once felt like a reminder of loneliness started to feel like a safe place again. Mornings were no longer about checking my phone for his name, no longer about waiting for notifications that never came. Instead, they became mine again. They were about coffee, the bitter warmth that filled my hands. They were about sunlight through my curtains, spilling into the room like a gentle reminder that life goes on. They were about music, the kind that made me dance barefoot in my kitchen, turning ordinary mornings into small celebrations of survival. I signed up for a pottery class. It felt random at first, like a distraction, but soon it became something more. Every Saturday, I found myself at a little studio, hands covered in clay, shaping pieces that were imperfect, but real. I remember the first vase I completed. It wasn't symmetrical, it wasn't flawless, but it was mine. Glazed a warm chestnut brown, it caught the light like honey. Somehow, in its crookedness, it felt like a reflection of me. Still standing, still whole. Even with the cracks. It was my way of saying, I am not the same girl you left. Because I wasn't. The old me would have stalked his social media, looking for clues, dissecting every caption, wondering about every like. But the new me had him blocked everywhere. Not because I was bitter, but because I had chosen peace over curiosity. Instead, I filled my feed with travel pages, recipe blogs, women who laughed loudly into the wind. I traveled to Dubai. Yes, the same Dubai. This time for me. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about me, going exactly where I wanted, experiencing it the way I had dreamed, without compromise. The city rose up like glass and light, skyscrapers glittering against the desert sky, and I felt small but not diminished, small in the best way, like part of something vast and alive. I experienced it myself, the way I wanted it. I wasn't following someone else's itinerary, or waiting for someone else's approval. I chose my mornings, I chose my nights. If I wanted to sleep in, I did. If I wanted to wander aimlessly through souks, I did. Every choice was mine, and that freedom felt sweeter than any luxury. I met new friends. It started casually. Strangers who became laughter over shared meals. People whose stories I'll never forget even if our paths never cross again. Conversations by the pool. Jokes that only made sense in that moment. Promises to stay in touch scribbled into phones. It wasn't about forever. It was about connection. Pure and simple. I went to the beach. The water stretched out like an endless sheet of blue, warm and clear, waves rolling in like a steady heartbeat. I let the sun sink into my skin, the sand cling to my toes, and for hours, I forgot the weight of everything I had carried. I floated, I breathed, I lived. I took pictures for days. Not because I needed to post them, but because I wanted to remember. The golden haze of sunset over the water. The neon lights that lit up the night like another sky. My smile, wide and unforced, caught between moments of joy I hadn't staged. Every snapshot felt like proof. I was here. I was whole. I was living the life I once thought was out of reach. My timeline became a vision board of joy, a place that mirrored the life I wanted instead of the one I left behind. I was living life on my own terms. No explanations. No waiting. No begging. Just me, reclaiming what was mine all along, myself. And then, out of nowhere, he returned. Not my ex. Dubasai. The man who had once promised me forever, before ending it with 3 words. I'm done. Those words had burned me, carved scars I swore would never fully fade. And yet, there he was again at my front door. And in that instant, my memory betrayed me. I remembered everything. The first time we met. The crisp white shirt he wore. The calculative laugh that made people lean in. The way his presence filled a room even before his voice did. Everything came rushing back, uninvited, unstoppable. He looked the same, tall, confident, sharply dressed, the kind of presence that once made me feel small, but now only reminded me how far I had come. Still, there was something different this time, something softer in his eyes. As though time had taken his edges and carved them into something gentler, more human. When our gazes met, my chest tightened, just for a moment. A muscle memory of old feelings, rushing in before I could stop them. But I didn't look away. I had spent too long teaching myself not to flinch at the sight of him, and I wasn't about to give him that power again. Fine, he said. My name on his tongue sounded strange, like he was tasting it for the first time after years of forgetting how it felt. I gave him a polite smile, the kind you give strangers, because that's what he was to me now, not the man who once held my heart, but a familiar face I no longer owed anything to. How have you been? He asked, his voice low, careful. I've been good, I replied, steady even. My voice didn't waver, and neither did my heart. That was my victory. He hesitated, then asked the question I thought I'd left behind. Can we talk? It was the same question my ex had asked, but from him, it carried a weight heavier than memory. It wasn't just a casual request. It was a reaching hand, an unspoken plea, a quiet attempt to reopen a door I had firmly closed. I didn't answer immediately. Silence stretched between us, thick with things unsaid. I wanted him to feel it. The distance, the boundary, the space I had carved for myself and refused to surrender. I don't think there's much to talk about, I finally said. Calm. Clear. Final. He nodded slowly, the kind of nod that looked less like agreement and more like acceptance of a verdict he didn't like but couldn't fight. He left me with that silence, and I thought that was the end. But the next week, he showed up at my pottery class. I don't know how he figured it out, but he always knows. He didn't sneak in quietly. He stood awkwardly by the door, out of place, clutching a paper bag like a nervous schoolboy. Inside, I would later find out, were pastries. I didn't know what flavor you liked, he said, scratching the back of his neck, almost shy. So, I bought all of them. The class laughed, everyone except me. Every Saturday, he was there, as though my pottery class had silently been written into his calendar, right under breathing and showing up. Sometimes he'd join us, his hands shaping clay into lopsided bowls and wobbly cups, each one worse than the last, each one making the whole class laugh until our stomachs hurt. He wasn't trying to impress me with perfection. He was trying to show me he wasn't afraid to look foolish in front of me anymore. That was new. That was different. Other times, he'd just sit quietly, a presence in the corner, watching me. Not in the way he used to, with a kind of possessive pride, but in a way that felt softer. As though he was studying me all over again, trying to relearn the girl he once thought he knew. One afternoon, after class ended, he walked beside me, a little too carefully, like he didn't want to scare me away. Then, almost shyly, he asked, "Would you have lunch with me?" I almost said no. The word sat heavy on the tip of my tongue. Saying yes felt like opening a door that I had shut with both hands. But something in his tone, gentle, unassuming, almost boyish, made me pause. And instead of no, I heard myself whisper yes. We sat at a little cafe. Nothing grand, nothing staged, just 2 people at a table. And for the first time in a long time, we didn't talk about the past. We talked about books, about food, about silly things that didn't matter. And I laughed. More than I expected to. More than I wanted to admit I missed. It was nice. And that scared me. Because nice had once turned into heartbreak. Nice had once been the doorway to nights I cried myself to sleep. Nice was dangerous. And yet, the following weeks blurred into quiet moments I hadn't seen coming. Walks in the park that stretched long past sunset. Him showing up with soup when I caught the flu, no questions asked, no speeches given. Just soup, warm hands, and a quiet rest. The little things spoke louder than words. Things that said, I care, without ever needing to spell it out. And for someone who had once left me with silence, the simplicity of those gestures felt louder than any apology could. One evening, as the sky melted into shades of orange and purple, we sat together, just watching the sun slip away. And in that stillness, he turned to me and said, I never stopped loving you. My breath caught. My chest tightened in a way I thought I'd left behind. But I didn't rush into his arms. I didn't let the words sweep me away like they once did. Instead, I remembered the girl I was 2 months ago. The girl who had to pick herself up from the floor. The girl who learned to stand without him. And for the first time, I realized I could listen to his words without losing myself to them. I believe you, I said. And I meant it. His eyes softened, almost as if years of unspoken regret had lifted off his shoulders. For a moment, I saw the boy he once was, the man he had tried to be, and the space in between. But then I added the words that changed everything. But I love me more now. That silence that followed wasn't awkward. It wasn't empty. It was necessary. Heavy, yes, but not suffocating. It was the kind of silence that forces you to stand still and see. And he saw me. Not the girl he once left, not the woman he thought I still was, but me as I was now. And then he smiled. Not the charming, rehearsed smile I remembered. Not the one that once pulled me in so easily. This smile was smaller, slower, like it had been carved out of humility. A smile that said, I hear you, I respect you, and maybe I'm willing to start over differently. After that, we kept seeing each other. But this time it was on new ground. I didn't look at him as my anchor, my lifeline, or the glue that held me together. No. I had learned how to be my own anchor, my own foundation, my own rescue. And because of that, every choice I made with him, every yes, every no, came from a place of strength, not fear. Weeks later, at another gallery event, he reached for my hand. There was no grand speech, no heavy declarations, no desperate attempt to win me back. Just the warmth of his palm against mine and a quiet, steady whisper. I'm here if you'll have me. And in that moment I realized I didn't owe him forever. I didn't even owe him tomorrow. I owed myself honesty. And so I promised him the only thing that was real, the only thing I could give without betraying myself. Today. Just today. And strangely, beautifully, that was enough. Because I had finally learned something I should have known all along. Love doesn't have to be loud to be real. It doesn't have to be grand gestures or fireworks that burn out too quickly. It doesn't need speeches rehearsed in bathroom mirrors or roses dropped on doorsteps in the rain. Sometimes, it's the quiet choosing that matters most. The steady hands. The soft words. The little things. No drama. No games. Just two people deciding every day to try again. To reach again. To stay again. And still, I lived fully. I traveled. I wandered through cities that spoke in accents my tongue couldn't quite hold. I tasted foods I couldn't pronounce. I laughed with strangers who became friends. And even in the thrill of newness, even in the faraway places, I never once felt like I was leaving myself behind. Because I wasn't living for him anymore. I wasn't bending or breaking or shrinking just to keep him. I was living with him. And still, fully for me, I still danced in my kitchen. Barefoot, music spilling from my speakers, sunlight bouncing off the walls. My laughter echoing louder than any memory of heartbreak. I still went to pottery every Saturday. Clay under my fingernails, shaping, molding, creating. Every piece imperfect, every curve its own reminder that beauty doesn't come from symmetry, it comes from persistence. And he still showed up with pastries. Sometimes too many. Sometimes the wrong ones. But always with that sheepish grin, like he knew it was less about the pastries and more about showing up. Love, I realized, wasn't about losing myself anymore. It wasn't about dimming my light so someone else could shine brighter. It wasn't about shrinking my voice or bending my spine just to fit into the narrow space of someone's comfort. It was about sharing the me I had fought, tooth and nail, through tears and silence to rebuild. It was about walking into love whole, not half. We had both changed. Life had done its work on us. Time had taught us. Pain had stretched us. And maybe, just maybe, that was why it worked this time. Because it wasn't about fixing each other. It wasn't about looking for broken pieces and gluing them together in desperation. It was about growing alongside each other. Root to root. Step to step. Two separate journeys that happened to align, not collide. And when I looked at him now, I didn't see the man who once said, "I'm done." Those words no longer had the power to cut me open. I saw the man who came back, steady and unflinching, to say, "I'm here." And this time, I was ready to hear it. Not because I needed him. Not because my world would collapse without him. But because I wanted him. And there's a difference. That difference between need and want, between desperation and choice, made all the difference. So this is my story. Not a perfect love story. Not the kind you frame in fairy tales or carve into marble, but a true one. Messy, imperfect, tender, real.
You love this story, don't you? If you want to hear more stories like this, make sure you subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. It really helps this channel. I'll see you in the next one.